Hello and welcome to the Americano podcast. I'm Kate Andrews and I'm joined by Freddy Gray and the Telegraph's Tim Stanley. Freddy, last weekend we had a near assassination attempt. This weekend we have the Democratic nominee for president dropping out of the race. Joe Biden is staying on as president, but he has decided not to continue his campaign and he has endorsed his vice president. Talk us through another wild weekend.
It's not boring, is it?
Not at all.
No, there's a lot going on in American politics, and it's quite hard to keep up. Joe Biden's announcement yesterday was expected on Friday. A lot of talk from Washington that it was going to happen on Sunday. Some pretty well-sourced journalists saying that would happen. And then on Saturday, there would seem to be some sort of pushback from the White House, talking about, don't just believe everything you watch on the news, telling White House staff that. And then on Sunday, I think quite a lot of White House staff were taken by surprise by the news because they weren't told about it. The first they heard of it was on social media. And so it's sort of not a surprise yet, it's still a shock. And I think the sort of amusing thing at the moment is watching the Democrats, who are very good at message discipline, kind of pumping out this line that he's a great patriot for doing this. Barack Obama called him a patriot of the highest order. Patriot, I should say. I shouldn't use the American pronunciation. And of course, comparing Biden to a latter-day George Washington, someone who falls on his sword for the greater good. That's all rubbish, of course. Biden has been bitterly fighting to survive. He's apparently reportedly very angry at senior Democrats who have turned on him, particularly Barack Obama, with whom he famously has this complicated relationship. I think people are now going to say I've heard one Democratic commentator calling him the most successful president in US history. I think that's a stretch.
Tim, this is the tension, isn't it? You have had candidates for president pull out of the race in the past, but never so close to Election Day. This is unprecedented. And we know that Joe Biden did not want to pull his name from the ticket. So whilst there are, ringing endorsements of Joe Biden's presidency from Barack Obama to former Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi to his own family, the difficulty here is that we know a lot of people within the party are frustrated with Biden for waiting to the last minute. We also have a good sense that if Joe Biden had it his way, he wouldn't be pulling out of the race.
Absolutely. I agree with you. First of all, the most successful president in US history is obviously Donald Trump. So I don't know where they're getting that from. Secondly, if he had gone quickly and quietly and with dignity, then that would be very different. Then it would be a falling on their sword narrative. But it has taken almost a month for him to go. It has taken the congressional leadership turning on him, Hollywood turning on him. And over the weekend, it felt a bit like we were watching a rolling coup in a South American country, as various people announced that something was going on and he was saying it wasn't going on. And then when he finally said it would happen, curiously, he said it on Twitter rather than said it in person. When someone does that, that either means it's because they're in tears and don't want to talk to anyone right now, or perhaps because they were presented with a fait accompli that meant they had to say yes to what they were told they've got to do at that moment. We'll eventually be given an insider's take on what actually took place. But until that happens, I think there's going to be a lot of conspiracy thinking about precisely what it was that finally drove Joe Biden out of the race. His behavior has reminded me of when my grandmother did not want to go into the care home. Right? It's a tragedy. No one wants to put a relative into the care home, but they can reach a point where they've got to go in. And God love them, they always fight it bitterly up until the very end. And he went through all those stages of anger and denial. And now we're finally at acceptance. This has happened before. It happened with Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1968. And a lot of people are drawing parallels with that year. You've got a Republican running again. You've got a Democrat who's pulled out. You've got a vice presidential candidate taking over a very divided party. The difference is LBJ was a titan of a politician. He left because it was his decision to go. By contrast, everything we've seen has been tawdry and very, very sad. And it leaves a bitter taste in the mouth heading into the convention. Kamala Harris is not being nominated or coronated, if that's what's going to happen, because she's the overwhelming choice of the Democratic Party or of the people. There were primaries. They went for Joe Biden. Last time Kamala Harris ran, she pulled out before she even got to Iowa. So she's being forced upon the party. So I think it's going to be a convention with a very tragic edge to it.
Freddie, just before we get to Harris, you mentioned the strained relationship between Barack Obama and Joe Biden. I think this is an interesting point because from Joe Biden's perspective, his team will be thinking to themselves, well, look, there's only one person who's ever actually beat Donald Trump, not just in a presidential race, but also in the midterms in 2022. Biden had very successful midterm elections if we compare them to Barack Obama or Bill Clinton. He will be sitting there thinking, I'm the one who's actually turned out the results. No, I'm not quite in the shape I used to be. If the Democrats, with whoever ends up being the candidate, and we will come on to the vice president in a moment, don't beat Donald Trump, Joe Biden's going to have an I told you so moment.
He may well do. I'm sure he will if he's still alive when the election happens. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but it's not completely inconceivable given the speed of his decline. Certainly, Joe Biden, that tight circle around him of advisors and his family, clung adamantly to this idea that Joe is the guy who can beat Joe Biden. He's proven he can do it before. He got 80 million votes last time. A lot of Republicans dispute that figure. And I think that they will continue to cling to that idea. And yes, you will see bitterness about it as the race gets worse. If Donald Trump wins and the Democrats lose, you will certainly hear a lot of that. I think, however, there are reports from the weekend that one of the things that confirmed the decision in Joe Biden's mind was some latest battleground state polling that showed them in real trouble in all those swing states. And, of course, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump proved to be this sort of perfect contrast with Joe Biden. You know, the defiance that he showed on stage, that Trump showed on stage, versus this frail old man. Couldn't have been worse for the Biden campaign. And then to top it all off, he caught COVID, allegedly. Some people think that was just a bit of preparation of the table for the announcement.
Tim, let's move on to Vice President Harris, because I think we should distinguish between the easier pick and perhaps the right or the best pick for the Democratic nominee. Freddy was mentioning there that the Democrats tend to be quite good about coming together on a message, especially a message of unity around a candidate, and that is obviously becoming Vice President Harris very quickly. She is the easiest person to put at the top of the ticket, not least because she has a mandate from the primary process on the Biden-Harris ticket. Presumably the money would transfer a lot more easily to her. They'd like to keep that $100 million that's in the war chest. She is the easy pick. That's not necessarily to say that she is going to be the most popular pick. You alluded to the fact that when she did run for president back in 2020, she was polling in single digits. She had to drop out of the race. When there have been rare opportunities for people to have their say about Kamala Harris, she hasn't been very popular. Her approval rating is as low as Joe Biden's, and it has been for years now. So what do you make of this decision to unite around her? As you say, it's not quite a coronation, but there's a very obvious pick amongst the establishment. How will that translate to what actually happens at the Democratic National Convention?
It's interesting. People think of the Democratic Party as the party of the people, and the Republicans far more a party of country club elites. Yet the Democrats almost never pick the outsider candidate in proper contested primaries. They last did it with Barack Obama, but actually they're a far more centrally controlled, more disciplined party that tends to do what its establishment says. By contrast, the Republican Party has been completely captured by its base. And has now been taken over by a kind of blue-collar populist movement. This is really very surprising. As regards to Kamala, okay, so now we get to imagine what could be unburdened by what has been. And it's a very moving and exciting moment. And I think in the case of Kamala, you all know her weaknesses. The viewers of this know her weaknesses. But let's consider some of the strengths, right? She is the biggest Democrat name after Joe Biden at the moment, except, of course, Hillary Clinton, but she's never going to run. So she has the advantage of the vice presidency. Secondly, she's a much better campaigner and speaker than we've seen her. And that's because as the vice president, she is almost constitutionally obliged to act like an idiot. That's what the job is. But now that she's let off the leash, she can now perform to the strength that she has. And she did a rally just before the weekend in response to J.D. Vance's nomination. And she was really good. And I wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that one of the factors in Joe Biden pulling out was actually her performance at that rally, because I think it showed that there is an alternative candidate here to him. someone who he likes. That's a third advantage she has. She is liked by Joe Biden. So picking her means that it feels a little bit less sore giving up Biden and going on to someone else. And finally, the reason why they're all coming around Kamala is because they're hoping they can avoid a properly open convention, which would be chaotic. And part of the reason why, to go back to my point at the beginning about the Democrats being super controlled, one reason why they are like this idea that they can choose the next candidate now so they can head into the convention and know what's going to happen is because they're terrified of losing control of that convention, because the Democrats don't trust their own base. They do not trust left-wing progressive Democrats and the Sanders supporters, who interestingly did not want to get rid of Joe Biden. They didn't want to do that because Biden's actually been very good on progressive issues. And they're worried that the convention could turn into something which either nominates a radical or one which ends up giving a lot of airtime to uncomfortable issues like Palestine. So it actually is very logical to go with Kamala. It's less insulting to Biden. And I think the party will probably rally around it in the next few weeks.
Freddy, who is Kamala Harris, though? Tim there talks about the difference between the centrist and progressive politics within the Democratic Party. On almost every issue, Kamala Harris has held both views. Before she was running for the presidency, but she was indicating that she wanted to back in 2019, she was co-sponsoring the Green New Deal. She was supporting single-payer healthcare and Bernie Sanders' idea of Medicare for all. She then pivoted and became a lot more centrist when she got on Joe Biden's ticket. But what will the delegates be voting for without Joe Biden at the top of the ticket? Harris does seem like a very different kind of politician.
Well, she is a bit of a mystery, or perhaps an empty vessel, depending on which way you want to look at it. Her background is quite left-wing. Her parents were both quite left-wing academics. She has kind of pivoted a little bit wherever the wind blows. When she was in California as a district attorney,
always keen to lock people up.
She was very keen to lock people up, which made her unpopular with the progressive base in 2020. I think what's interesting in the last 24 hours is you've seen the left of the party really come out quite strongly for her. 3 of the 4 of the squad, the most famous progressive Democrats in Congress, have come out for her. The black vote has pretty much got behind her already. Jim Clyburn was quick to get behind her. The Progressive Caucus, the Hispanic Caucus, that they're all coming out strongly in her favor. I think she probably is to the left of America. But the Democratic Party and that sort of elite that Tim was talking about, they are way to the left of where America is now. So they will become increasingly comfortable with Kamala Harris in the next few days, I think. But there will be tensions. And it was very interesting, Tim mentioned Palestine. I mean, as we come up to the convention in Chicago, famously riots about Vietnam in '68 in Chicago at the Democratic Convention. Will Palestine be an issue? What are those progressive... Has Kamala Harris promised them something on Gaza in order to secure their backing? That'll be a very interesting question.
My last question to both of you, we're going to see in the coming days and weeks how the DNC actually plays out. There was talk of trying to do a virtual roll call with the delegates to have their candidate chosen before the DNC for reasons that Tim outlines there. But I'm curious as to what you both think the Trump campaign is making of all of this. And I think there are 2 strands of thought. The Democrats, of course, are saying he's going to be terrified. He now has to go up against a younger, robust vice president who's really going to take him on in the debates if he's even willing to do it because he's so afraid. But then I think there's another camp of people who are thinking this is the kind of candidate Trump has always wanted to run against. It was actually quite difficult for Donald Trump when Joe Biden painted himself as the centrist and the unifier who would bring America together on more centrist issues. He's always wanted somebody who has a more radical record that he can attack. What camp do you fall in, Fred?
I think probably more the latter camp. I think the Trump campaign have long anticipated that Biden would drop out. I think they were probably hoping he'd hold on because he was looking so hopeless. I think the obvious concern among Trump's advisors now will be that he, in his tendency to be very nasty and brutal, particularly towards women in public, will say sort of overtly misogynistic things and cause a kind of a backlash among women. And Kamala Harris's campaign, by the way, is going to be abortion, abortion, abortion. She's going to talk about very little else and the kind of threat that the Republican Party in a second Trump term poses to what they call women's reproductive rights. I think that she is obviously more of a threat to Trump than Biden was in his current state, and yet, as you say, Biden always had that appeal to the unions, the Teamsters, the blue collar working class in swing states,
to frustrated Republicans,
and to double haters, as they call them. People who voted for Obama and then for Trump, and then for Biden. Biden was quite good with those people. Does Kamala Harris appeal to those people? There's no evidence that she does.
I come down on the other side. So to channel Donald Rumsfeld, in politics, you want to be against a known. You want to be against Joe Biden because you know what you're dealing with there. And that campaign would have been really easy. And some polls showed Trump at this stage pulling ahead even in places like Virginia. So it just looked like a cakewalk. Whereas Kamala is an example of a known unknown. So you know her, but you don't quite know how it plays out. I mean, the worst thing is an unknown. The reason why I think that known unknown is tricky is, first of all, because one reason why progressives wanted to stick with Biden was they didn't want to have to sell the ticket afresh to their base. Well, now they don't have to. People know who Kamala Harris is. She is likely to mobilize black voters. She is likely to mobilize women, not just around the issue of abortion, though I agree with Freddy. That's all she's going to talk about for the next 3 months. He's spot on about that. But they'll also be mobilized about the fact that you're now running against a woman of color. This is a historic moment. It's Obama and Clinton combined, right? This is a big deal in American history. So it's going to mobilize the base. It means that in the debate, Donald Trump is going to be up against someone who will be at least as vital as he is. So that's not going to be so easy either. So in other words, it makes what was going to be a really straightforward strategy really complicated, and you don't know how it will play out. And I just think with all of these things, you mustn't make predictions. You just can't. And one final thought on the convention. If Joe Biden had been reelected, a lot of people would have tuned in to see how he would have done in his speech. What would he have got wrong? Would he have made it through to the end? Would he have fallen down the steps? Okay, there'd have been that element to it. But now we're going to be watching the convention because it could actually be good TV. And Trump was really worried prior to his assassination that he was not getting the ratings that he used to get, that people just weren't tuning into the rallies. And the assassination put him back square into the center of American public life. Well, that's going to be taken away again. This convention is going to be interesting. Donald Trump is now competing against a box office event. And I think that's something that's going to get on his nerves. And I think it's going to draw a lot of attention away from him, which is what he needs in order to mobilize his base.
Tim and Freddy, thanks for joining me, and thanks for watching Spectator TV.